Yeah, I called it. The second viewing is the one that brought the tears. In reference to the title of this video, there's levels to which I appreciate this movie, and one of those levels is deeply, deeply personal in a way where it feels like this story is coming at the exact moment in my life where I needed it. And the thing is that talking about the movie on that level is something that's gonna feel real weird to write and record and probably to watch, assuming that I can even bring myself to do it. So instead, I'm going to keep any of the specifics of that stuff off to the side for another day, and instead discuss my emotional reaction to the film purely in its own context. There will be zero plot spoilers in this video, but if you don't even want to know things like the tone that the movie ends with, which I more than understand, be warned that I do talk about that towards the end of this video, specifically around this timestamp. So if you haven't seen the movie yet, maybe just watch until that point and then come back later once you've seen it. Until then though, I'm going to be as vague as I can, and start by saying that after 2 viewings, I think I do like this movie more than Volume 2. Which is insane. Guardians of the Galaxy here cements itself as easily the MCU's best trilogy, with only Captain America offering even a slight competition. I absolutely adore all of the Doctor Strange and Black Panther movies, but Guardians is such a particularly emotionally affecting vision that even if those heroes get killer third entries, they're basically fighting for second place. If I'm to articulate why my adoration for Volume 3 is so much more concrete after a second watch, I think it's just the fact that knowing where the story was going thematically allowed each and every character beat to land that much harder. Now, that's true for any competently scripted story, so like, duh, but it's the inevitable feeling of it all that really brings things together. The sense that it can only ever be this way. On a first watch, I had a niggling problem with how there's a lot of characters going back and forth and back, and trying to follow each other and whatnot all throughout the second and third acts. It's not that it was difficult to keep track of, but it felt convoluted in a way. On second watch though, I appreciate it almost as a comedy of errors born from a deeply emotional character-driven place. Characters feel like they're making the decisions they would make, and like the plot just gets very crisscrossy as a side effect. More than any plot structure stuff though, as with any Marvel film, what really makes or breaks Guardians Volume 3 is the characters. And more than any other creative voice in the MCU, maybe more than any other creative voice in the history of this genre, James Gunn treats his characters with a level of real intimacy, bordering on uncomfortable. In even the best comic book movies, I think there's something of an unspoken aversion to having characters be too consistently, straightforwardly emotional, at least in the way that you see here. The word I'm really looking for here is sappy, and in the best possible way, James Gunn has as little aversion to sappiness as he does toward crudeness. And looking back on his filmography, I feel like that's always been true, but it's especially so here. Within the story of the movie, Volume 3 follows a group of Guardians who have been working together for years and years and are so comfortably settled into their sense of self, both individually and as a group, that their frustration, fear, joy, trust, love, and pain all goes completely unfiltered. There's zero shame in portraying these characters just feeling their feelings and speaking their truths, no obfuscation. The still unresolved emotional fallout of Gamora's death in Infinity War ends up being what makes it so Chris Pratt Star-Lord is still the nominal lead by virtue of being the one whose growth arc is most obvious most quickly. But as the film goes on, it's clear how much it's firmly a true capital E ensemble piece. In a way you could argue no other MCU movie has been that wasn't made by Joss Whedon. And I know Whedon mentioned you, but his movies really are the only ones besides this that I feel capture that sense of everyone being the main character. Everyone in Volume 3 has an arc, and all of those arcs complement each other and weave into a tapestry that bolsters the previous 2 movies, creating a holistic and cathartic trilogy about just how hard self-reflection and moving toward one's own emotional needs really is. Looking back to Volumes 1 and 2, it really feels like the journey of this film is the only satisfying place these characters could have ever ended up. The only place. I can't even say that about Avengers Endgame. Absolutely everyone cuts to the deep, deep core of why they are the way they are in this film. Except maybe Groot, I guess. He's just kind of vibing. In particular, though, I want to shout out Mantis and Nebula. The pair of them have always been great support players, but a surprising amount of the movie's emotional weight is carried and furthered by the two of them. Nebula especially feels like the entire film would just crumple down in shambles if you tried to remove or diminish her presence even slightly. Now that's not to disparage any of the others at all. Along with Karen Gillan, Chris Pratt, Dave Bautista, Bradley Cooper, Klementeiff, and Zoe Saldana are all giving their absolute best turns as these characters. Which is saying a lot because the bar was already sky high for pretty much all of them. For Pratt in particular, while the internet loves to clown on him and sometimes do much worse than clown on him, this movie is a solid reminder that he really is a great performer when he wants to be and when given the right material. James Gunn as Kraglin returns in a role that's just as strong and heartfelt despite being smaller than the others, and while Will Poulter as Adam Warlock may not be what a lot of comic fans want, I find him incredibly compelling. As written, Warlock is largely a source of plot progression and comedy, but as a performer, Poulter takes that foundation and imbues a surprising amount of stoic dignity in with all the clowning. The big scene stealer, though, is Chukwudi Iwuji as the High Evolutionary. At its core, the movie's heart belongs to Rocket Raccoon, and he's the one Iwuji plays off of most primarily. But this villain is one who thematically and emotionally complements the whole cast in a way that's just plain impressive. The High Evolutionary is the embodiment of perfectionist entitlement. The pure disdain radiating whenever he has to so much as explain something to lesser beings is captivating. Even more captivating, especially on repeat viewings, is the sheer degree of how deep his fixation with Rocket goes and why. For as much as has been made about how unabashedly evil and unsympathetic the guy is, and that is definitely true, what a lot of that praise misses is that the High Evolutionary is not shallow. He's hateable, but he has complications in the sense that the paradox at the center of his character is deeply understandable and compelling. The thought that one could create something that surpasses themselves, and how maddening that is, in a world where you've gotten used to feeling like the only remotely intelligent person in the room. There's so many little lines and facial expressions where you can feel that on some level, the High Evolutionary wants to be understood. On some level, that might be all he wants. He's endlessly irritated at people for not thinking on his level, but at the same time, the idea of any intellectual equal makes him paralytic with rage. He's a character who can express hatred and admiration in the same breath. He's a spectacular villain, easily one of the genre's most effective. And you know that means a lot coming from me because I wasn't even all that impressed with Kang. Anyway, that's a lot of character discussion. Let's talk about pretty colors. Aesthetically, the Guardians movies take the cake as the best-looking MCU films. And if you twisted my arm, I'd say this is the best-looking of the three. It's got an extremely humanistic and grounded quality to it that the previous two films don't, even in its wackiest moments. And it's a really effective juxtaposition without ever being in your face about it. There's not a moment in the film that doesn't feel like you're watching real people with real lives in a real place. And while that's largely on the script, direction, and performances, helping out is that much like Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves, it's also a shockingly good showcase of some impressive practical effects, sets, and costumes. Go see Dungeons & Dragons, by the way! And even when the effects aren't practical, they're still incredible. There's Rocket, obviously, but there's also some creature designs here that are genuinely stuff I never imagined that I would see in a Marvel movie. Like, these are the kinds of designs that you would see and admire in concept art, the kind that you would just have to quietly accept would only ever make it into the movie in an extremely watered-down form. The one technical aspect of the movie that lets me down a bit is the score. The songs chosen for the licensed soundtrack are, as always, utter bangers, and I haven't been able to stop listening to them since seeing the film, but not being able to get Tyler Bates back for the original score was a real shame. The orchestration that we have largely suits the movie, but there's a big gaping hole where the actual Guardians theme should be. You know, the dun 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 da da da. That one. Not gonna lie, I started to get excited when I noticed that the theme hadn't really played through the movie, because I figured they were building up to this big moment where it would start blasting when the team was all together again and doing something awesome, but then the theme just kind of plays during two comparatively nothing moments. It does get one particularly emotional use toward the very end, but I'm pretty sure that that's actually just a track pulled straight from the first film. So, speaking of the ending, a lot has been made by others about how final the ending of Volume 3 feels, and how it's that sense of finality that the rest of the MCU generally doesn't offer. I don't disagree, but the thing for me is that what comes with that sense of finality is a sense of joy I don't think any other superhero film in history has ever conveyed in its ending. I admire a lot of MCU movies for having endings that are tragic or conflicted or uncertain. But there's value that supersedes all of that, in saying what feels like a real goodbye to characters I love in the full knowledge that they're happy, that they've become complete people. There's so few opportunities in a connected universe, or a franchise of any kind, really, to let a whole cast of characters end a story on this note of utter, rapturous love for themselves and those around them. And watching it, I could practically feel my heart blow up 3 sizes, Grinch style, just swelling to burst in sheer contentment. It's my favorite final scene in a Marvel movie without question. Maybe my favorite final scene in a movie, period. Maybe one of my favorite final scenes in a movie, period. Just the sheer sense of joy and comfort that the end of this movie radiates out of every pore is something I don't know if any other film short of Speed Racer or Everything Everywhere All at Once has ever given me. A lot of people are talking about how there probably won't be a higher note to end their emotional journey with this franchise on, meaning both the Guardians of the Galaxy and the MCU as a whole. And as someone who doesn't plan on doing that anytime soon, I can't bring myself to disagree with that sentiment. James Gunn really injected his entire soul into this trilogy, and with Volume 3, he's left the brand in the perfect place for someone with a totally different vision to come in, inject their own soul, and make it a completely different animal, which is something that I hope I get to see happen one day. But if this is goodbye forever, it's the best goodbye we could have ever asked for. What did you think about the movie, if you've seen it? What did you think about this video, if you've seen the movie or if you haven't? Are you subscribed already? If not, fix that. Give the answers to those questions as well as any other thoughts in the comments, drop a like, and I'll see you in the future.